Hey there, Simone here, as always, with some ideas and insights of what to pay close attention to when you're getting ready to grow and scale your business. So I read a great quote by Marx the other day that really explains a lot of what's going on in the employment market and why things aren't necessarily going exactly the way that you want it. If you are having trouble with your team members not delivering at the level that you want to, and feeling like you're giving them all that you can, but it's not getting you the results that you need. So the Marx quote says, humans are only independent if they're self-sufficient. So when you think about it, all of us want independent team members who can make great decisions without your input, so that your phone is not ringing 25,000 times a day, that they can make good decisions on their own, that they can be strategic, forward thinking, and really help you up level this business, right? That's pretty much the holy grail, the golden goose here, the unicorn that we all hope to have. So when you think about that quote, and I believe that's true, that humans can only be independent if they're self-sufficient. Now, an employee, by nature of the game, is not self-sufficient because they're depending on you for payment. So they're not at their best when they don't feel self-sufficient, and we have to set them up to be self-sufficient. Covey coined, or I don't know if he coined these phrases, but this is one of his focus, is that there's dependent, independent, and interdependent, right? So we don't want an dependent employee, because that means they're dependent on us for every single answer, question, solution, action, all that kind of stuff. And that's what probably keeps you in the weeds so much. So dependent doesn't work. Completely independent may be a problem, because now you have people who are going off the reservation and doing all sorts of stuff that's not in alignment with your company vision, mission, and standards and rules of engagements and all that kind of stuff. So when you think of completely independent, that's not necessarily the best way to be either. Now we're looking at interdependent, which means we are dependent on each other to do the best job possible. The sum of the sum of the parts is greater than the whole, right? That's what we're looking for. So how do we treat and address this alienation that comes from not being self-sufficient? So that's where it goes back to having really, really good business foundations. So we have to make sure that they really understand and buy into your product, what you do, which is your mission. So you have to get really, really clear on what that is. A lot of our clients have multiple things that they do, which leads to a lot of confusion because nobody knows what they're focused on. So getting really clear on what is making the boat go faster, what are you focused on, what are you actually focusing on that makes this company grow, right? So getting really clear on what product they're supporting. And then the other part is the act of production, which is whether, and it doesn't matter if it's product or service here, same thing, but active production means how are we executing against this mission? So everybody has to get really clear on what's the best step-by-step action plan that we're all aligned with, that we're all bought into, that we're all collaborative with, that we're all strategic with, so that we can create incredibly intelligent, aligned, and effective action going forward. And then we have to make sure that we set them up for accomplishment, which means your productivity. So that's the most important part for us, because we want to make sure that with that really good step-by-step action plan, that people are collaborative when they're establishing it, so that they actually own the plan, that they have ownership over the plan, that they are accountable, that the ownership is such a huge part, but they are in alignment with this, and we have set them up for high productivity. And then, of course, the other part that brings this alienation together, that actually is the opposite of it, is when we have community, and that means team. So when you've done a really good job setting up your culture and being the guardian of your culture, which as a CEO, that is your job, being the guardian of your culture. Because culture is one of those things, I always say, that's how people behave when nobody's looking. That's what makes people do the right thing, whether you told them to or not, because it's just the right thing to do, and they're those kind of people, right? So every single person on your team has to be that. So we have set up this culture that builds community, because now everybody understands, if we're going through all those steps, right? They're really clear on the mission. They're really clear on how we achieve that mission. They're really clear on what it means to actually be successful and accomplishing and being very highly productive. Then the community aspect means everybody understands how they impact each other, how doing good will elevate the rest of the team, and how missing impacts the rest of the team, the company, the customers, everybody else negatively. That impact piece is huge with culture, because that's what creates that peer pressure that keeps everybody a little bit more in check, because it's not just about them. It's not just about, hey, if I mess up, if that's just on me. No, it's on everybody. Everybody else will get messed up. So we need clarity of product. We need the making sure that the active production is dialed in. We need to make sure that everybody can have this accomplishment and is part of the community. Because the opposite of this, so how do we combat alienation, is I guess that question, is with great engagement. So when we look at what makes people engaged, what makes them show up at a higher level, what makes them go the extra mile, what makes them actually think more forward, strategic, is when what they do is meaningful. They care about it. This is part of their own set of values. This is a part of their own set of why. So it's got to be meaningful. There has to be safety for them, which means I'm significant. People care about me. My opinion matters. My input matters. My impact matters. Right. So it's a safe environment to express opinions, be creative, and sometimes, yes, mess up, because there's no great growth and productivity without making mistakes and sometimes going too far out of limb. So when you want an interdependent team that is highly accountable, that goes the extra mile, produces at a very high level, you have to be okay that with them sometimes making mistakes and messing up. That's gonna cost you, but it's gonna cost you a whole lot more when they don't do that. So safety has to be part of that culture and daily conversation, because a lot of people don't feel safe in their jobs, so that they just play it safe, and you can't afford people playing it safe because they don't feel safe. And then the other part is availability, that everything is available to them that will help them do a better job, whether that's coaching, resources, good planning, but always clarity and certainty from the leadership. That's like the most important thing in terms of how do you make sure that your team member has everything available to them that will set them up for success. So the other part that's really important about all this, and this is really hard for some people to get with, is that you can't alienate your team members, your employees, from the economics of the business. So what that means is being transparent about the numbers, helping them understand what the KPIs are, how they're driven, how they impact the business, how they're interdependent, how they link, how they impact. So we have to get really clear on that ourselves, because before we can be clear with the team, and the team has to understand the economics of the business, no matter if they're top executive or most junior position in the company right now. Everybody has to understand how the business makes money, what helps with success, and what is a detriment, like what's cost and what's actually growth. So you have to make sure that part of your business practices is explaining the business to everybody. Even if they're at a low entry level, whatever they're doing, they have to understand what the business does, because otherwise they can't think for themselves and take responsibility if they don't understand how their actions impact stuff. So very, very important. That's also what sets them up for the highest level of contribution. Because when you think about that again, it's like when they understand how the numbers matter, why they matter, how they impact each other, what contributes to saving cost, what contributes to raising revenue and especially profit, they can be much more aware and active in making that happen, no matter what role they have. And that's also what gives them the knowledge that they need to solve problems, because now they can actually make decisions from a informed place where they have the context that they need to make those decisions. So what you really want to bring to the table for them is, one is customer engagement. So every employee, every team member should be very engaged with the meaning of the business for the customer, so that they understand how this business is serving our customer, how we're making an impact, how we're making a difference, what our customers' lives are like with us when we're doing a great job, and without us, even when they don't, either when they don't have us because we didn't do a good job selling them, enrolling them into our service, or when they have us and we're messing up. So everybody needs to get really, really close and personal with that meaning. Then we need to make sure that everybody has that economic understanding that we just talked about, that they get what success in this business means from a numbers perspective. And the next piece that gets really scary is that there's economic transparency. So we're not just talking about this set of numbers that's out there, that's just completely conceptual. We have to talk about how we are doing in terms of that success measure, so that they get really clear about, hey, like these are the levers we're pushing, and these are the ones we need to pay attention to, and this is where we are right now. And then of course we also need to make sure that there's not just adequate but fair and appreciated economic compensation, so that they really get where they are right now and where they could be. So especially with the younger generations, having a growth plan in place that helps everybody understand how they can grow with the company, what opportunities are there for them, how they can be in control or participate in their own career growth is massively important. So make sure that every single one of your employees has a growth plan in place that gives them clear milestones, what the goals and objectives are, what the expectations are for them to take their career to a higher level. And then when we think about that, is this whole, everything that we're talking about comes down to, we're encouraging them to participate at a higher level. And that piece is so important, especially in a tight job market where we're all fighting for the same talent. Is so when they're able to participate, that means goes right back to, it's much more meaningful, they have impact, they see why they're there. So the really good news is that builds strong relationships, especially when you're going to have that growth plan with them. You build a strong relationship because they realize you care about them. So we have that strong relationship, and that means that you cut down significantly on turnover, which is the most expensive aspect in business, when you have good employees who are leaving because they just don't feel like that they're getting what they need to be successful and to grow their careers at your business. So we want to come to a place where, think about interdependency as a partnership. This is a partnership. And we talk about what engagement looks like and what contribution looks like, so that they have control over their way of behavior. And then you also want to consider, because everybody wants, like, I can't tell you how often I hear, oh, you know, we ask our employees, we ask our team members for contribution and nobody speaks up. And that's a tough part, because sometimes you have, like, especially depending on, you know, your business that you're running, if you have a team of engineers who are all introverted and from India, they might not speak up because there's so many cultural aspects that are already quote unquote against them. So you have to understand, you know, when you have a multicultural team, you have to understand where everybody comes from. Like there's the like cultural differences overall, as in people come from different countries where there's different customs and different ways of behavior. So, you know, somebody from India or Asia, they might not ever have spoken up because in their countries it's not safe is not the right word, but it's not what we do. It's not the custom. There's a hierarchy that has to be followed, and you don't challenge authority. So you have to be able to bridge those type of cultural differences. There's also the cultural differences of where we all come from, even within the country. What kind of jobs we've had before and what the culture at those companies was. There's plenty of companies and businesses out there where fear and intimidation is the status quo, and speaking up will get you nothing but sacked, and there's no appreciation for contribution. So we need to bridge that. So we need to make sure that everybody understands the rules of engagement at the company. So this is how we are. This is how we do stuff. We actually value contribution. We want our employees to speak up. We want your full talent that we don't get when you're sitting quiet. So you have to give them the why behind it, what you're looking for, what's expected, and what's valued. And sometimes to bridge that type of situation, it helps when you're trying to brainstorm and really get a sense of what the potential pitfalls are. You could set a group aside that's specifically tasked with, hey, find the pitfalls, because that immediately takes out all the cultural differences right now. And then, of course, there are technical barriers. Not everybody has the same skill set in technical stuff, so we want to make sure that everybody has the right way of communicating with each other. But overall, it comes down to when people don't contribute, there's something in them that tells them not to. So they don't feel safe. They have never been encouraged before. Of course, they're the introverts in the room who have to think everything through like much more thoroughly than the extroverts, because they process internally and not externally. So in their mind, it has to be close to finished and good before they will speak. So we have to be able to have the range as leaders to bring all those people to the table and to get them to contribute, because we draw it out of them. We set the rules of engagement that make clear what's expected, what's valued, so everybody shows up. And then, of course, your one-on-ones are highly valuable to do that, because it takes a lot of pressure off. Now they're just with you. They're not having to think about what everybody else is thinking about them. So when you have your one-on-ones with them, my best recommendation is that you really pay attention to how you're asking questions. To get better answers, you need to ask better questions. So stay away from status quo discussions. Ask open questions so people are really challenged to actually respond, not just yes or no. And make sure that you also share about yourself, because I mean, everybody has heard about the theory of vulnerability. But when you share about situations where you have messed something up, or somebody else who you know has, it makes you more human, more relatable. It establishes relationships, and it establishes a relationship, and it helps them understand that you're just human, just like they are, and that you are willing to let them in on what works and what doesn't work from your perspective and your experience. So you want to be transparent with them. You want to be vulnerable to a certain extent with them. You want to reflect to them. You want to make sure that you take notes so that they get that what they're saying is actually important to you, and then sharing those mistakes really helps. So when you think about what gets your team members to be more interdependent, what gets them to be more self-sufficient, what gets them to achieve at a higher level, produce at a higher level, and be more accountable, go back to everything we just talked about. So I hope this is really helpful to you. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll talk to you.